Hello and welcome to The Outspoken Artist. My name is Carlo, and today I have the pleasure of introducing a remarkable guest, Sarah Marie Page. By day, she is a fierce attorney navigating the legal world with her wit and determination. But by night, she transforms into an enchanting young and adult fantasy author, crafting worlds of romance and betrayal. Her talent for storytelling has been featured in the Y Magazine, The Advocate, Hippocampus Magazine, Crow Quills Magazine, and The Door is Ajar, while her sense of humor shines on her website, sarahpagestories.co. Without further ado, help me welcome to the show, Sarah Page. Hey, Sarah.
Hi, Giancarlo.
How are you today this wonderful Hallows Eve?
I am doing great. Trying to figure out how to get the trick-or-treaters to come to our house. That's what the current agenda for the morning is.
This is the first year that you're at your new place, correct?
It is. And so in our prior places, they were more like condos. We didn't really get trick-or-treaters. And so we're really excited because we're in an actual neighborhood this year and hoping that we will finally, after like 10 years of being married, get trick-or-treaters. It's a big day.
I'm hoping for you. Entice those kids to take candy from strangers.
Yes, exactly. It's such a weird concept when you think about it, but let's not think about it.
Well, hopefully you get all that candy out of the house and get a bunch of people coming. How do you tell us a little bit about where you are in the country? You're on the opposite side of me, which I'm in the Florida side of the US. Where are you at?
I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. So we are the opposite of most of the country, which sucks in like January and February when it's all cold and snowy. We have really great winters, but the summers are awful. So we have just barely gotten down to the nice weather, quote unquote. We're still in the high 70s. So it'll be a really, really nice Halloween. I know my friend on the East Coast was complaining that it was going to be snowy and cold for her. And I'm like, no, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous, finally.
I'm gonna say I'm jealous because it's gonna be in the high 80s in Florida with humidity. So I feel bad for these kids decked out in costumes. So I'm keeping mine very low key, where if I get hot, I just wear shorts and I'm good. Good. But that's wonderful. How do you like that state?
We love it. I'm from Arizona,
Okay.
actually. Grew up in the Gilbert area and then came back to practice law. So all of my family is here. My husband is from Las Vegas area, and so we're both desert rats and used to the heat.
You mentioned you're an attorney. Can you tell a little bit about what field of law do you practice? And then we'll touch base a little bit on the author side of things.
Yeah, so I do trust and estates law. So that is helping people plan for when they die. It's fitting for Halloween, right?
It is.
Helping
It
people
is.
plan for when they die and also administering their estates when they actually die. I will say the death and the money brings out the weird side in people. And so I've had cases where I've had to track down like a $30,000 dog. That's yeah. The dog is as expensive as a car, but the dog went missing. The drugs, the sex, the rock and roll. One time, my legal assistant had ashes at her desk over Thanksgiving
Oh,
because somebody sent her ashes. I'm like in Colorado visiting my grandparents and trying to figure out how to authenticate if these are human ashes or whether or not we were sent a cremated animal. So yeah, very, very interesting area of law, very fitting for Halloween. The one client gift I've ever gotten is a Ouija board.
that's that's interesting looking at it that way, especially the story of the ashes. I guess not being in that field, not being in that profession, I guess that could happen. People send you ashes and you have to authenticate whether they're human remains. That's again fitting for Halloween. So
Yes.
nice. Do you feel that Halloween on your author side, does it inspire you to write fantasy? Is it about the same? Do you think that it just sets the mood? How does Halloween play into composing stories?
Yeah, so I think it depends. There was a book that I was working on back in 2020 and probably early 2021. And that book was like a very like witchy manuscript with like corpse snatching. It's like the darkest thing I've ever written. And if you look at what I write now, that's all like light and fluffy, you'd be like, wow, Sarah, you were writing a book about like corpse snatching and witches. And I'm like, yes. But that book was very, very inspired by Halloween and was like a cozy witch book with pumpkin vibes and Halloween vibes. And so that one was very much inspired by Halloween. The other ones are more House of Smoke, which is my book that's all done, is very like cold camping vibes. So springtime, lots of summer like spring storms. And Serpent Green is more like Italian Renaissance in the summer. So, like I said, it depends. But yeah, I did actually write a book that was very Halloween inspired.
No, that's good. And we'll touch base on Serpent Green a little bit later as well. For my viewers, you specialize in the genre of young and new adult. Could you help us understand, for those that don't know, what is new and young adult?
Yeah, so young adult is those are the age brackets that we're targeting. So young adult tends to be more 14 to 18. New adult is more like 19 to 22, so just starting off college. There's can be some overlap between those and definitely plenty of adults like young adult and new adult. I read a lot of young adult fantasy and so does my mom. My mom will send me book racks of like, you have to read this one. But yeah, so just different ages that we are targeting. So, House of Smoke, the one that I have written and I'm getting ready for publication, that one is young adult. Serpent Green is more new adult.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Congratulations, by the way, on that stage that you're in. What is normally, if you're starting out as a author, what are the steps to theoretically get published? Not self-published, but actually get published.
Okay, so the first thing that you're going to need to do is write a book. And you can't write a book in a day. Taking a book takes time, and probably the first book that you write is not going to be very good. And I know I thought I was going to be the exception to that. I was like, my first book is going to be amazing and everybody's going to love it. It was the witchy book, and I could not figure out how to fix it. So set that one aside, came back to another one. So having a book, having a really good community is the second thing that I would recommend. So like get feedback on your book. And that's really scary to put it out there because you're putting out a piece of your soul. But having that community and that feedback on your book, because there are things that you won't be able to see. So write a book, get feedback on the book. And then you have to find, if you want to traditionally publish, you have to find an agent. An agent is kind of like a real estate agent where they will pick your book and then try and like sell it to the big publishing houses. So real estate agents try and sell your house. Publishing agents and literary agents try to sell your book. So you query to different literary agents and send that out. And if you find one that falls in love with it, they will say, I'll take you on. They'll usually have more edits that they want you to do. And then they will start subbing it around. It's called going on submission to different publishing houses. Then the editor will buy the book and they'll put the announcement in Publishers Weekly. The editor at blank and blank bought this book and the deal was done by this agent, and the book will come out in probably 18 to 24 months because they buy them about 2 years out.
Oh, wow. It really does sound like a real estate transaction when you put it that way. And the publication and the announcement, that's really neat. That's really neat. What about for self-publishing? How easy is it to just put your book out there and showcase it to the world?
Yeah, so the beginning steps are very much the same for self-publishing. You got to write a book. I would recommend that you get feedback on that book. I mean, you can put out anything that you want if you're self-publishing, right? But I would recommend go learn about writing craft, get feedback on it, make it the best that you possibly can, and then put it out there. I mean, there are different websites, so you can put it out on Amazon, Barnes and Noble does some printing and distribution. Ingram Spark is a pretty common one that a lot of indie authors will use, but you put it out there. So as a part of putting it out there, you want a good cover because everybody always says don't judge a book by its cover, but we really, really do.
Yeah.
And so having a eye-catching cover is important, and you're doing all of this yourself. So instead of if you sell a book to a publishing house, they will edit it, they will give you a cover. You sold the book to them, and so you retain a little bit of a control, but not as much as you would think. Like most authors don't get much of a say in the cover that they're given. The marketing department will go say, well, this is what we think the cover would do best for this type of book. But if you're self-publishing, the sky is the limit. So it's really important to get a cover that fits within your genre and that will set the appropriate reader expectations. And because if you read a book with a cover and it's got a bare man chest on it, your expectations are going to be very, very different than if you go in and you grab a book and the book has like a little old lady and a cat and it's called like Mrs. Frizzle's Mysteries or whatever, right? Wildly
Yeah.
different expectations.
I would say the bare chest will definitely tell me something completely different than the old lady with the cat. I definitely give you that one. You mentioned community, community within the author space. What what kind of community do you have, and how has it helped you in regards to potentially having your work reviewed or handling rejection or writer's block? What does the author community for you look like?
Yeah, so there are a couple different people or a couple different types of people that I have in my corner. The first one are friends that are writers. The writer friends are very into writing craft. They are also trying to get published. They know story and in the same boat as me, right? They are called, and I call those people my critique partners, usually, like especially the ones that I am the closest with. And they're there to bounce ideas off of. I run a lot of ideas by them. They'll tell me if my ideas are stupid. We've gotten to the point with each other, which if you can find those people in your life who love you and care about you enough to not let you put out something stupid, like hold on to them because you don't want the people, and especially when you're writing and publishing, you don't want the people that are just going to blow smoke up your butt and tell you that it's good and let you like put out something awful to the world that everybody else is going to be like, why was this put out? You got to find the people who will tell you that your ideas suck and help you make them better. So there's the critique partners. I also have friends who are not necessarily authors, but like to read a lot in that genre. And my friends that read voraciously. So I have one friend who is on my team and reads my stuff and I bounce ideas off of her too. She read like 250 books in 1 year. She's like, that
Wow.
was the normal year. That was not like a healthy year, but I read 250 books in a year. And my other friend who doesn't necessarily write, but I come to for a lot of like editing advice, and she has a very, very good eye for stories. She reads upwards of 100 books a year. So these people read a lot and understand the genre really well and can say, this doesn't like you're making the wrong reader promises and you're setting the wrong expectations. With writing, an important thing is to make sure that you are setting the appropriate reader expectations because you're going to have a lot happier audience and a lot happier people if I'm writing the book with a bare man chest cover, I don't want to attract the people who want the grandma and the cat. And same
Valid
thing, if
point.
I'm writing the grandma and the cat, I don't want people to come into my book saying like, "Oh, I wanted like the bare man chest, fated mates." So
No, that's good. That's good. You definitely need that feedback because you don't want to also waste time. You're putting all effort into creating characters, storylines, plots, and etc. Just to then put it out there and it's crud. What are some suggestions you give to people in dealing with rejection?
rejection is hard. And there's a part of me that wants to say it gets easier. And to some extent, like, yes, but also like, no. Like, it is always hard to put yourself out there and to put your heart out there because when I'm writing, like what I write, it has a piece of me in it and a piece of my soul. And I put my heart into everything. And then to have people say, like, eh, it's not for me, like, that's hard. And it doesn't necessarily get easier. I think surrounding yourself with good friends is really important and people who see your talent and recognize you. And, it's nice to have people like your family who's like, no, you're great. But what's helped me the most is having like those critique partners and those people who are also getting rejected too. And they know, like, they're like, this sucks. And sometimes we just like sit together and we're like, it's hard. And we pick something hard. I will say with writing and creativity and publishing, and this is probably the same for other industries, the highs are really high, but the lows can also be really, really low. And so having people to weather that with you is incredibly valuable.
No, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I recently listened to the episode that was for the Mondo Street Social Club, the October episode, because you've been there twice. And you mentioned in there that to deal with some of the anxiety of rejection, you've actually handed off some of the reviewing of all these different queries that you do. What system do you have in place to help you with managing that? Because all these things you're putting out for querying, do you do it or do you have somebody else do it for you?
Yes. So I got to the point I was sending out queries for House of Smoke earlier this year, and House of Smoke was a book that came out of rejection at work. And so to write that, it was like very therapeutic to write that book. And then I go put it out and I get some more rejection. And I just was not prepared mentally for that. And it was like really eating at me. And I would like go check my email like obsessively waiting for like responses, and I had the manuscript out with several agents. I had a really, really good request rate on it. And the feedback that I was getting was like, "Oh, I loved it. I just didn't love it enough." And like, "Oh, it was really good, but I just there was something I couldn't put my finger on that I'm going to pass." In order to protect my own mental health, because my mental health comes first.
Right.
Writing is important to me, and it's something that I care deeply about and spend a lot of time and emotional effort and energy on, but my mental health comes first. So, in order to protect that, I went to one of my friends, and this was not a writer friend. And I did that on purpose, actually, because I knew that she would have the most distance from it. So, I went to a really good friend. She's the one that reads 100 books a year. And I said, "Will you check this email? And will you, tell me what's going on with this? And then don't tell me about the rejections. Just tell me about, the requests that I get. And that way something doesn't fall through the cracks." And she did that. And that was really, really helpful for me. I had my husband change the password on, on all of the things that I was using to watch it so that I like physically, because I'm like, I don't trust myself to not hack into this if I have the password. I still don't have the password to this day. And I think I've slowed down on sending the queries for House of Smoke, but yeah, still don't have the password for it.
That's a great system. If whatever works for you, right? You figure out that if something is affecting you at that level, might as well just do something because then it'll impact everything else, and it might just kill the love of what you're doing. And we don't want any artist to go through that. Tell me a little bit about your, as we were talking earlier, you do law work and also you're an author. What kind of process do you go through to switch your headspace from being an attorney to an author? Because a lot of people wear multiple hats. Not every artist has just full-time artist work. They tend to supplement it with something else. So what do you do to go from that to the other?
Practice. That is my biggest piece of advice. I've been writing pretty consistently since 2018. So it's been like 5 years, right? And now I've like trained myself. Like I write in the mornings and I write in the evenings. And so I'm really good at writing in the mornings and the evenings. The interesting thing is that if I have some time to write in the afternoon, when I would normally be doing attorney stuff, I actually have found that I have a hard time focusing on that. And so
Hmm.
I've been doing it for long enough that that's like my brain just kind of settles into, oh, it's writing time because it's the morning, or it's writing time because it's the evening. Practice is a big one. I've heard of people having like routines that they will do when they're sitting down to write, or writing in like the same place for a while. Maybe this is too much information, but for a while I was writing in the bath. Like I Pavlov trained myself in college. I was taking this Latin class and I hated it. I needed the language credit, but my brain is just like not wired to learn other languages. Like that's just not the way that I think. I loved baths. I hated Latin. I'm like, I will do my Latin homework in the bath because it makes it a little bit more palatable. So I drag the big whiteboard over next to the bathtub and sit there and like write out all the Latin words and like practice Latin in the bath. And when I started writing, I was like, I'm going to write in the bath. And so the days that I didn't feel like writing, because I wanted to make a little bit of progress on it every single day. That was my goal, is I just, a couple paragraphs a day. And so the days that I didn't feel like doing it, I took a bath and I wrote from the bathtub. So I put my computer on an upside down laundry hamper right next to the bathtub and like type, 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 type. And so I think that I Pavlov trained myself to write in the bath, but I also Pavlov trained myself to write at night and in the morning. Now I don't write from the bath as much, especially because we don't have a very good bathtub in this new house that we have moved into. But that has still, like, the time of day thing is still carried over.
Interesting. Really, whatever, again, whatever works for you, right? Whether it's the
Yeah.
bath, whether it's being outside, whether it's in the car, who knows? Whatever works for you, you make it work, and that's great. That's great. So it's 5 years. It's been 5 years. Um, since then, I've heard that some of these characters that you have developed, they come out and scream at you, and that was very visually striking to me. They're yelling at you to come out. Can you explain what is your process, or how do you recommend someone get these characters that might be coming from within out on paper on a computer into a story?
Yeah, so they come from all over. Some of them I have to go looking for, and I have to hunt for them, and, like, finding their backstory is like finding, like, pulling teeth. And then some of them come to me and they're, like, screaming at me, like Dante and Sienna from Serpent Green specifically. I had another book that I was supposed to write, and I had, like, planned, I'm like, "I'm gonna do White Heart," which is, like, my Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it's, like, fairy tale vibes. And then I got to the point where I was, like, brainstorming that and, like, very on brand for Dante and Sienna in Serpent Green, but they, like, started, like, screaming at me, like, "No, write me." And I'm like, "Okay, fine, just to get you guys to shut up." And then I took a break from them and they started screaming at me again. So this idea, like Serpent Green, it's very on brand for them. Um, this screaming. So yeah, I would say to anyone who is looking to develop characters and starting out with writing, look at your own experience. One, learn about character arcs. That is something that I screwed up in the beginning. At the first book I wrote, the characters had no character arcs, and I was just like writing, no idea what I'm doing. There's nothing wrong with doing it like that when you start out, but going back to reader expectations, when someone has read a lot, they expect growth and character arcs. And one of my friends who read a lot read that book and she was like, there's no character arc and there's no plot. Like, you got to learn about, like, story structure and character arc. So go learn about that, and then go look at your own life experiences. People say write what you know, and that can be kind of tricky in, like, fantasy, because I'm writing about, like, an Italian Renaissance like, I didn't live in the Italian Renaissance, nor do I live on a little windy island without trees, which is where House of Smoke takes place. Like, but what they really mean when they say write what you know is to write the emotions that you know and to write the things that you've felt. And so, for example, House of Smoke came out of really crippling career rejection and was my therapeutic book for that. Serpent Green, the one that I'm writing right now, really came out of the community that, like, lifted me up when I was so sad about all of these rejections and the people that came. And so House of Smoke is my, like, the individual is important book. Serpent Green is my community book about people rallying around you and picking you up when you are down. And both of those are experiences that I have had.
That's really insightful, Sarah. Would you have any books or any shows or any podcasts that you might recommend to somebody who could stem for some help with that story arc? Because I've seen in some stories that the character is great, but it's just so linear. Anything you recommend for new authors to check out?
I am glad that you asked this question. I am a character development and, like, a storycraft nerd. I read a lot. My suggestion is to someone who's just starting out. KM Wyland has a really, really good book on character arcs. I always just search and I forget what it's called. I think it's like Amazing Character Arcs or something like that. But I always just search KM, her initials, and then Wyland, and then character arcs. Save the Cat is a really common story structure. Lisa Crone has a book called The Story Genius, which is really good for developing characters. And even when I'm just starting out any new project, I will go do the exercises in the first 100 pages of that book because I think that they are incredibly valuable. If you are more advanced and want something a little bit more advanced, I wouldn't recommend this to necessarily someone who is just starting out, but I really like Secrets of Story by Matt Bird. It's kind of just a collection of thoughts. He's a screenwriter, and so all of his examples are like from film, but that translates really well into story. Like I said, it's a little bit more advanced, that one. If you are just starting out, K.M. Weiland's character arc books, Lisa Crone's Story Genius, especially the exercises in the first 100 pages, and Save the Cat to learn about story structure.
That's wonderful. I'll make sure to put their information on the screen so people can go ahead and search, and I'll probably touch base with you to get any websites and whatnot. So it's easy. Or put them in the description, one or the other. I'll figure it out. That way they can look into that because it sounds like whether you're a beginner or more advanced, really great resources for your character development. Speaking of which, last question on characters. Do you have a favorite character or scene from any of your stories that you like most? And if so, why?
I would say it's tough to pick a favorite character because it's like picking a favorite child.
Good point.
I like them all for different reasons. Dante from Serpent Green, which is the one that I'm writing right now, has been really, really fun to write because he's kind of like an all-powerful himbo. He's really dumb. My books are the they have like I have a dumb sense of humor, and so that is like very much reflected in my books. I was talking to my friend Kelsey the other day, and she was like, "You make a lot of potty jokes." And I'm like, "I do." For example, I'll give you a quick example. So in Serpent Green, the premise is that she's a portrait painter and she binds herself accidentally to her nemesis, who's the crown prince, who's Dante. And anything negative that one of them feels, the other one experiences. For example, she gets her period, he gets the cramps. Like I said, potty jokes. So
Well, speaking of Serpent Green, because we teased it in the beginning and it's been sprinkled throughout. Tell me and the audience a little bit about Serpent Green because you have a newsletter, you have some snippets of other stories as well on your website. What is Serpent Green?
yeah, so I the best way if you want to follow me and if you have the sense of humor of a 12-year-old boy like I do, is my newsletter. So you can go to serpentgreen.com and sign up for that. I have a short story that's available that's set in the world of Serpent Green called Rapacity. That is about a girl who is set to marry the crown prince. It's different characters in Serpent Green, but she's set to marry a crown prince, different crown prince than Dante. Her job is to go murder him, and she strikes a deal with the demon prince and to stop it because she actually like cares about him, and she learns that her fiance is learning to murder her too. So that was a fun book to write. If you like the relationship dynamic in of Catalina and Zafiro in Rapacity, you would like the relationship dynamic of any of my characters in any of my books. So I tried to write it as a way that if people wanted a quick and easy way to see what I wrote and to see like my writing style and the types of characters that I like and my 12-year-old potty sense of humor, then that is a very easy low stakes way.
Is Serpent Green going to be available once it gets published? Is that the game plan for that?
Yeah, so that's the and the reason I picked that is because I was trying to grab URLs for the books that I was writing just so I could eventually have landing pages for that. And Serpent Green is very easy to say. There's some of the strategy behind that. Serpent Green is very easy to say from like a podcast and to just remember and stick in your head. And so that one became my newsletter, and Rapacity is a story set in Serpent Green. But yeah, so that one will take you to my newsletter, which is the best way to follow up and to watch what happens and see the potty humor. But I'm also active on Instagram and TikTok, but the algorithm does what it does, and so newsletter's better.
No, that's great. And outside of potty humor, what can they expect in this newsletter? So that way I know what's in there because I get it. But what would you expect to receive in this newsletter?
Yeah, so I tell stories. Sometimes I write the stories or I have like extra short stories. I played a game with my newsletter subscribers maybe 6 weeks ago where I wrote a short like 700 word story about a historical queen. And I said, can you guess who this person is? Tell dumb stories about my life, show character art. When I have character art, I send out polls and ask questions, do giveaways. So we have a really fun time. I get fan mail about my newsletter, actually. So that's kind of a fun, like I have people emailing me like, oh my gosh, I loved the title of this one. Or like, oh my gosh, you're so sassy in your newsletter. And I have a highlight reel on Instagram. So when I don't do it every time I get a nice comment, just because sometimes I'm in the middle of like work or running somewhere and I just forget. But my favorite ones, I try to repost on my Instagram stories and then I made it into a highlight reel. So if you are interested in some of my newsletter fan mail, check out Instagram.
That's great. That's great. And tell me, what is your goal with your stories and your newsletter? What are you trying to build with this new journey in your life?
I want people to feel things. So whether or not that is laughing or feeling, like the biggest compliment that people can give me that I've gotten about my writing is I felt that. Like I felt it in my heart. It made me feel something. I want people to feel less alone too and to feel seen and to say, me too. I'm an awkward human and that is reflected in my stories. And so it's putting yourself out there, talking about your experience, helping people feel less alone, especially when it comes to rejection. I have talked a lot about rejection in some of the other podcasts that I've done, but rejection is hard, and putting yourself out there and being told no is hard. And so yeah, it's building a community, finding a community, feeling less alone.
Community's great. It can really help push you past that stage of should you do it, should you not do it, and at times you just got to do it and learn as you go along. And yes, you've been a guest at a bunch of different podcasts. I recommend people to find you in some of these ones. I have a whole list of them, but you've been in at least what is it like at least five different podcasts, not including this one this year, correct?
Been in more than 5. I have a lot that I have been in a lot, especially recently, where the hosts are like, "Oh, I'm saving this for December because I'm recording it now so that I can release over the holidays and not have to record all over the holidays because the holidays are crazy." So I've been in quite a few. I've also guest hosted um a podcast. Is That Even Legal? And that's always really fun. I'm a reoccurring guest host on that one.
That's great. That's great. So yes, I'll try to put some of these on the description so people can click on them, listen, because there's a lot of great insight in regards to you were talking about rejection, some of your origins in regards to what pushed you and catapulted you into being a kick-ass attorney, putting it that way. Question for you, Sarah. If you mentioned Instagram and we have Serpent Green, if people wanted to find you on Instagram, what is your username?
My username is at Sarah Page Stories. So it's like my website. And I am meaning to go update my TikTok to be at Sarah Page Stories. That one is my name, sarah.marie.page, to be consistent. But I have not done that yet.
Well, make sure to put that on the screen so people can follow you. And before I forget, was there anything you think that I could have asked you or any good questions that would be good for the audience to know?
I would say my biggest piece of advice to someone who is just starting out is to just write. I mean, we've talked a lot about, finding community and finding, learning about character arcs and stuff like that. But starting is the first step. And it can be so daunting to look at a blank page and say, I am going to write a whole book today. Nobody writes a whole book in one day. A book is written one sentence, one paragraph, one page at a time. And with any creative thing or any goal that you want to accomplish, progress is still progress, even if it's little.
That's great. I like that. You just have to start and take whatever steps you have to take, whether small or big, to get you past the end goal. Sarah, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to join me. This one won't be posted in December because I do have a pumpkin and it'd be kind of weird if I post it in December. So that'll be
Sure.
posted very soon. And outside of that, I invite everybody to check out serpentgreen.com. Sarah Marie Stories.co is the other one that I came across as well. And listen to some of that humor that Sarah has on our website. But again, thank you. I really appreciate you joining. Can't wait to see when Serpent Green gets published.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.